Welcome, everyone. Many of you are joining us to learn about innovation in the real estate industry. For the new folks, we do these on a weekly basis to better connect with real estate professionals, provide help inviting industry leaders, and in the end, to show the latest updates of our product that's built to transform the real estate transaction process. Today, we'll be discussing growth through acquisition during the pandemic. Adam Mahfouda, CEO and founder of Oxford Property Group, is our guest. We'll talk about the challenge of integrating different tech stacks and cultures and their unique commercial, residential, rental, and sales model. Adam, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Joe, as usual, my co-host, nice to have you as well.
Thank you, Willie.
So Adam, you have an incredible background in the real estate industry. Can you share a little bit about that with us? I guess start off with how you got into it and then what led to founding your own brokerage.
Yeah, I had actually a real estate brokerage license since I was in college. I did it like one summer when I was in New York City interning. And so I always had my license. And I think what happened was I actually didn't have a job. I was looking for an apartment with a friend of mine, and I didn't want to pay the broker fee. So I applied to be an agent at a company, was looking for my friend, and we found something. And then one thing actually led to another. And then I started helping other friends find apartments and was making a decent amount of money. And then I had always wanted to be sort of a business owner and entrepreneur. I had started several different businesses kind of right out of college. And this sort of real estate made sense. And as soon as I could, I sort of started the real estate company, Oxford. So.
And when you started it, was that strictly doing rentals?
I started out as a rental agent. I think like based on your age, a lot of people, sort of their peers or their clients are who they surround themselves with. And I was like a kid out of college, and so kind of like my access was to my peer group of college renters. I didn't know so many people buying like $1 million, $2 million apartments or buildings or anything like that. And truthfully, I didn't have so much knowledge about how commercial real estate worked. So I was just hustling, renting apartments, advertising on sites like Craigslist, and Facebook wasn't even sort of like a available marketplace at the time, but was just generating leads through referrals and advertising online and renting apartments. And so from that, it just really wanted to turn that into sort of my own business. The broker who I was working at the time, his name is Greg Harden. He's currently my partner, and basically went to him and said, listen, I think we could turn this into something much larger. We had myself and 4 other agents, and we went from there to the 750 agent company that we're at today. So
wow,
that's was the evolution.
And when you started the brokerage, was it solely focused on rentals, or were you doing sales as well?
We didn't necessarily distinguish between rentals or sales or commercial. I think at least my view has always been as an agent. A lot of other brokerage firms, I think, encourage agents to specialize in one thing, and I think it is good to be like a master of a certain product. But I think real estate is, as an asset class, so connected, and the parts that you learn doing a rental will help you understand commercial real estate better, will help you sort of develop better. And likewise, if you're building condos, I think the idea of like building a condo development project, you understand what the consumer wants as well. So, so we initially started the main sort of value add, or the main benefit of the company, was always to empower our agents and give them all of the tools that they need to succeed. And so that's what we were doing when we were starting, just providing agents, whether we wanted commercial, residential, rental, sales, with all the tools, and letting them sort of like run their own entrepreneurial businesses. Our business model, as you know, we pay agents out 100% commission. So they pay us a flat monthly desk fee in exchange for 100% of what they earn. So that encourages a very entrepreneurial environment. And so our goal, sort of from the outset, was provide agents with everything they need, give them the support and guidance, but let them sort of like dictate the path that they want to travel in real estate. So
very cool. It's very unique that you have your fingers in sort of all those different types of aspects of the real estate industry and don't specialize, because we certainly have a lot of guests on, and that's one of the things they always talk about is specialization, which is great when that part of the business is hot, but when it's not, you're you don't really have anywhere else to go.
Yeah, I think there's definitely agents within our company that specialize in one specific thing. We have people that only focus on, office leasing, or people that only do commercial retail, or agents that only do sort of like luxury condo sales, and a ton of agents that do rentals. But I think as a company, I think we provide all of the resources for all of those facets of business. So I think we sort of have a good idea of everything. And then me personally, I started out as I said, doing rentals, moved to sales, started doing more commercial real estate, and then now also I'm active in doing some like smaller scale development projects. So it's good to see kind of like the real estate industry from all the different aspects of brokerage, and also now a little bit on the development side as well.
Yeah, very, very unique. So you recently completed two acquisitions during COVID. In March, you acquired Kian Realty and then Spire more recently in September. So can you talk a little bit about those, and how did COVID accelerate those? Or I know that in both of them, you had already been having ongoing discussions for quite some time.
Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't as if COVID happened and we were like, this is the time we need to be buying companies. I think we, for a long time, for about like 3 years or so now, have been actively looking in the New York area and other areas for acquisition opportunities, reaching out, laying the groundwork for these types of deals to happen. And I think with Spire specifically, I had met with their owner maybe 20, 30 times before this deal actually happened. So I think both deals were certainly accelerated by the COVID environment. I think with the uncertainty, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, what would happen, I think people sort of wanted more certainty in knowing that they would have strength in a larger business, and not having to worry about their office expenses. With the New York acquisition specifically, there's a ton of synergies that we've been able to create through rolling up these different businesses, just eliminating office overhead, eliminating duplicate expenses, office rent, certain software systems, and then also obviously just combining bulk purchasing of like advertising and software accounts and everything. So there's like a ton of synergies obviously that we've gotten out of it.
So speaking of synergies and software, there's certainly challenges involved with that, though, in the sense of integrating two tech stacks that were not designed to necessarily be compatible with each other. What's that process been like for you?
Yeah, so we historically we've purchased a couple other companies and we've rolled them into our existing tech stack. And with Kian specifically, we actually rolled all of those agents into the Oxford tech stack. Spire's been the first company that we've purchased that we've kept the two different technology stacks, or we've done so to date. And truthfully, it's something that we thought would be much easier than it is. It's not only challenging on the software side, trying to build and develop two separate systems. So as you guys probably know, with any software business, there's a large operational side of things. So we're effectively have two people on the operational side also, kind of like running the same processes because of the two different software systems. So we're still working on integrating it. We're potentially thinking about trying to just develop one single platform that can house both companies as well. But it's a big lift, and for the next business that hopefully we'll acquire, we'll be definitely more prepared on the integration process. But it's a much larger lift than we actually had anticipated. So
Yeah,
it's
as
definitely something to think about.
myself and Joe can attest to it, it always seems much easier than it is.
Yeah.
Now, do you, in terms of technology and what you implement and offer to your agents, do you, I'm assuming, purchase some third-party software solutions? And then do you develop anything in-house as well?
We do. We definitely buy certain third-party applications. I think it's mostly agents coming to us saying, "Hey, there's this great new product that I've heard about. Is there a way that we can buy it in bulk and bring the cost down on a per agent license, on a per agent license basis?" And then we actually have a team overseas of 5 developers that have been building sort of like our backend and our web and our listings and a lot of agent marketing tools as well. Um, and just probably over the years has costed us way more than just sort of like outsourcing it or just using a third party platform. But just something I've noticed about myself and probably to a fault is that I just generally am extremely hands on and like doing things myself whenever possible. Um, but that's what we've done till date. That may change going forward, but to date we've pretty much done a lot of in-house development as well.
So Adam, during the acquisitions, did you keep any of the technology stacks that the acquisition company had, or was your plan to integrate into your existing platform? And
In
how much time did you give yourself for the integration?
Yeah, in all previous acquisitions, we had just fully integrated everything into our platform. We didn't keep anything. We just used our platform and sort of migrated the agents onto our platform. As I mentioned, Spire was a little different. We basically till now, and was part of the thought process, was just to keep things completely separate and based on really use the operational side to drive what we would make adjustments on the software side. So, so as far as like any of the software tools that we felt on the operational side that would help, we would sort of make that transition on the software side. But right now, things are running completely separate, and we're trying to assess where we can integrate the two.
Gotcha. So switching from software to culture. So different software, different cultures. How do you integrate two different cultures and create sort of a team environment and have agents be motivated and inspired to join your firm?
Yeah, I think that the even more challenging question is how do you do that in the middle of a pandemic when the easy way to create culture is to have events and bring people in and like do team building exercise, all of which effectively can't happen right now. So um, we we did basically both of these deals without ever sort of like ever having any like parties or in-person meetings. What we have done is we've had like a ton of education and seminars, and similar to this webinar, just done lots of education. I think making ourselves and the management always available for video calls or training sessions or whatever it may be. I think that's what we're able to do now, and we've had some fun sort of like virtual virtual sort of like meetup sessions, and we've like shipped out alcohol to people and done like virtual happy hours. So sort of all that stuff I think is something that you can do, but I think it's a much tougher challenge given that everybody's virtual and everybody's coming from different places as well. We do have like a large non-software based overseas team on the operations side too. Um, and I think like with that, I think it's about sort of like key people there interacting with key people here and sort of like driving that culture. So I think those key leaders are able to sort of like interact with their team overseas and create maybe like a subculture, and that's been really nice. And then whenever possible, we do fly those people to the U.S. to. I mean, we haven't been able to do it at all this year, but whenever possible, we fly those people to the U.S. They'll spend a week with us. We'll go to dinner, sort of like take them around New York City, have them in our office, so that way they get sort of more of like an idea of what the company vibe and what the company culture is like. So those like, believe it or not, I think those little interactions are able to sort of like continuously build culture, even though they're not happening every day. So.
And you were already pretty well set up to operate remotely prior to COVID, so it must have not as been a big of a challenge as it was for some people.
Yeah, we have, as I said, we have 750 agents. Behind us is a virtual picture of our office. You can see we only have about 50 computer stations. So we've never taken out like retail space, or we don't have an office in every neighborhood of the city like a lot of real estate agents do. We relied very heavily on agents operating virtually. Most of our people never came to the office, and we tried to streamline our business and the transaction process for that. So we were doing like remote deposits to our bank account or accepting ACH payments like 4 or 5 years ago. So that was nothing really changed there. I think for a while, the trickiest thing for real estate agents was figuring out how to show and rent or sell an apartment without actually taking the client in. So the most creative thing that I had heard, and this was in the height of the pandemic, but this is when you weren't even allowed to go to a showing. The most creative thing that I had heard that we had come up with here was actually sending the client to view the apartment, having the client then call the agent on FaceTime from their apartment, and then the agent would give the client a virtual tour and walk through without actually being there. But the client could see it physically, and the agent would be sort of like safely away from them. So like little things like that, I think were improvements upon the social distancing and the lockdown and the pandemic. But I think like those little things would have definitely changed as well.
So after we get out of the pandemic, what do you think will survive that you learned during the pandemic as far as daily operations and or routinely work?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think with a real estate transaction, I think 95% of the time, unless you're buying an asset for 50 cents on the dollar or some like large discount, I think people want to come physically through the building or the apartment or see the rental property. I think it's very hard to just buy real estate from a virtual tour. I've had friends that have like through this pandemic purchased real estate more personally, in Florida or in other parts of the country, and they're never just buying it without going down. There's a certain point where it's like, okay, I'm going to get on a flight. I'm going to come see it before I'm ready to close on this property. So I think that will come back, and I think that's here to stay forever. I think a lot of the in-person paperwork that's sort of unnecessary. I think we'll probably never see a closing happen in person again. There's no reason for the closing day to happen. Everybody to sit around a closing table, waste 3 hours of their time and like sign paperwork, and one guy shows up late and you got to wait 30 minutes for he shows up and the bank comes. And I think that won't happen again. But I think like real estate is a lot about actually feeling the place that you're buying and seeing the very intricate details of the structure and the physical aspect of it, which is really what I like so much, unlike other assets. If you're buying and selling a stock, you don't really need to like feel like what it's going to do for you. I think what's fun about real estate is there's like a very physical aspect of it, and you can touch it, you can feel it, you see it, you build a building, you build an apartment, and you have like something that you can look at. And I think the idea of like digitizing that is sort of like sad and against what real estate is. So
I can certainly relate to that, sort of like what you mentioned when you were looking for your first apartment and you're searching through different listing sites, and an apartment looks great in the pictures, and you get there and it's facing a back alley and there's no light.
Yeah.
So.
And like even if that improves, I think like going and seeing like the ocean from an apartment, or like seeing like this amazing view, is completely different than just like looking at a picture of it. And I think you need to like experience that. You need to like have some emotional connection before you actually make that decision to buy it. So
absolutely. No, I saw Joe's face light up when you mentioned that you'd never see people sitting around a closing table again. So Joe, do you want to add something there?
I was going to let you have. Yeah, I did. I can you share some of the experiences the buyer and the seller have when they're now doing remote closings? Have you received any feedback? Do you see any difference between the trust between your agents and the buyer or the seller during their remote closings? Any higher satisfaction rates?
Uh, I don't know. I guess I don't know that we've seen anything different. I think like unless there was a problem sort of like prior to closing in a walkthrough or something, I think that's really when the holdup would be. Um, I think like from an agent perspective, truthfully, I think most of the times a lot of the agents, I mean, I don't want to throw any agents at our company on the bus, but a lot of agents sometimes don't show up at the closings. I think there already were a lot of closings that happened via power of attorney. So all of the real estate that I've purchased over the last 10 years, I think I was at maybe 2 closings out of 20, 30 closings. So I've always signed just like power of attorney. It's just like I always felt like it would be nice to sort of like shake the seller's hand and say thanks, but I can always call them or email them and meet up with them if I really wanted to chat further. So, um, so I I don't think, to answer your question directly, I don't think that there's anything that's like lost by not being at the closing table.
In terms of efficiency, though, it's certainly much better.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're not the people doing the paperwork, so I can't, I'm not the attorney that's dealing with the bank and the title or the title company that's putting the closing docs together. So I can't fully speak to it, but from the agent perspective, I think from a buyer's perspective, it just saves people time not to have to go and go in person and sign paperwork. So and then I mean to some extent I think that's like happened with all businesses, right? The whole like just eliminating the commute out of like unnecessary meetings and conversations and just doing a virtual call. I think people just realize it's just like a little bit easier.
Absolutely. Now, pivoting a little bit to your sort of unique model where, you have your hand in commercial, residential, rental, and sales. How has that helped or hurt you during the pandemic?
It's been good. I think if we were, solely focused, and I think I'll say that I was always a little bit sort of like embarrassed that our company was like a did a lot of rentals. I think the big powerhouses in New York City focus on like high end luxury sales. And we do that. We do, we've sold 60, 70, $100 million buildings in New York City. But the idea that we started as this like rental company and now we're doing these larger transactions was sort of like always like a little chip on my shoulder. But I think we've been lucky and grateful to have that revenue as well coming in because um, just speaks to the diversity of our company. And so when um, the sales market has clearly slowed, there's less transactions, and the rental market pricing has come down, but transaction volume for us is actually relatively consistent as it's been in previous years. So I think we're lucky to have that consistent income coming in, and I feel like agents too here are happy to have the ability to continuously work and continuously make money through the rental side of things. Um, so I think that's been great. I'll say as something that we're moving into and trying to move away from and trying to avoid in the future, we're very focused on Manhattan and Brooklyn and sort of like areas of the Bronx. I think we didn't expand our offices soon enough out of the Manhattan area. So we actually just recently opened an office in Saratoga, upstate New York, and so we've already added like 10 or 15 agents up there. And I think part of our growth strategy will be to not only be so focused on one specific location. It's funny, like you think like, oh, New York City, previously this, like, oh, New York City there's always going to be demand and it's always going to be like the hottest area. And that's not like necessarily an area in which you need to diversify because the city as a whole will always hold its demand. And this just proves that like, that's not the case where, there were several months where people were just like dumping their leases and getting out of the city and the agents and also owners in those suburban areas and still now to some extent are just overloaded with clients trying to find them homes and properties. And so I think a little more diversification on that front would have been something that we hopefully, ideally would have thought of sooner, but it's something that's definitely on the forefront now.
And you had expanded pretty recently into some of the suburbs of New Jersey, Westchester, correct?
We are. I think we hadn't pushed that growth as much as we're focusing on it now. It was always sort of like a side project. We are licensed in New Jersey. We're licensed in Connecticut and Florida as well. If we had a larger presence there pre-pandemic, I think we would have been able to pick up a lot more business that we potentially lost. But I think now it's like a big focus of ours, and we're actually growing quite nicely in those areas.
So in those areas, Adam, what's attracting the agents over to Oxford?
I think the fact that we have like a brand name in New York City really does carry a lot of weight. I think the idea that we're one of New York City's biggest real estate agencies with 750 agents shows that we have a real product that people trust. I think in the smaller markets, our model is actually very uncommon. Most of the sort of like smaller town real estate companies are much more traditional in terms of their commission split. And so I think the desk fee model is extremely attractive to agents outside of New York that have really never heard of it. And to some extent, I think the first thing that people think is that it's sort of like a scam, right? Agents pay us $500 a month. They get 100% commission. They're like, what's the catch? This company's going to go out of business. I'm going to cash a $100,000 commission check, and I'm not going to be able to receive it. And I think the fact that we have an established brand in New York and there's so many agents here that have succeeded on it and are still succeeding allows us to grow much more rapidly. And also, we've done it before now. We've opened several offices. We have the infrastructure. We know how to recruit. We know how to put the right people in place to manage those agents. And so I think we're just now sort of developing the right formula for growth outside of just New York City, and hopefully we'll be able to take that and expand to other locations as well.
So Adam, we don't generally get the opportunity to talk to somebody from the commercial world on this webinar. We're mainly residentially focused, but what is your take on the outlook for commercial real estate in New York City?
I just met with my landlord of our office building yesterday to try to negotiate and take more negotiate and take more office space in our building. And so he would not give me a longer term lease. So I asked for a 10-year lease on additional space. And his view, he owns several different like large buildings in New York City and a lot of retail. And his logic was that he thinks this is, like a 6 to 8 month thing. And he doesn't want to lock in a long-term lease with me at a discounted rate because he feels that things will bounce back 6 months from now. I generally feel the same way. I don't think that the concern, and this was even like earlier in the pandemic when people were moving out of city and adding the city and saying, because it's like people are on top of each other and that's why the COVID rates were so much higher and it's about population density. I think the exodus was more about the possibility of working remotely and people actually enjoying working remotely more than coming into an office. That being said, I think every company is going to have like a mixed group. So we have a lot of employees here in New York City that aren't required to come in the office, but come in the office every day just because they want to work out of an office space and they like the office environment and they like seeing their colleagues and they like having a specific balance between their home life and their work life. So I think there'll be a ton of people like that. I think we'll see a lot more demand once the financial institutions and the company and other companies are actually requiring their employees to come back in several days a week. So I think that'll be a completely different shift. And I think even if people have to be in the office 3 days a week now and instead of 2 days a week, I think people will definitely still need office space. And I think once the offices come back in, retail and those other, office, retail, theater, all of those businesses come back, I think all of the other sort of like businesses will follow. So and personally, from somebody that lives in New York, I've actually liked less traffic and less people. It's
I
actually
can agree with that.
been like kind of nice, so I remember like mid-pandemic, just like walking outside in the summer and like no traffic, like I could walk down my street and not have like a line of 50 people on the sidewalk, and just thinking how nice New York City was with all the outdoor restaurants. And so as long as there's some sustainable way of keeping the city clean and safe, and having restaurants and sort of like all the leisure is still available, I think it's still going to be a great place to live, and a place that's not like there's no other place in the world really like it. So
No, it seems to always bounce back. It may take time, but I think it's just a question of when, not if.
yeah, no, I agree with that.
So before I let you go, I have to ask, what's in store for Oxford a year from now and 5 years from now? Where do you see the company going?
Yeah, so the 2 acquisition deals we did, we're excited about, but I think we're really looking at other acquisition and partnership opportunities. So hopefully by next year we'll be somewhere in the 2,000 agent mark. That's our goal. I know we've set a very lofty goal with that, but that's where we'd like to be. And then I think just in terms of, as I said before, just being in more places on the map, I think we really want to be in different locations, not just New York City. I think, especially for a business like ours, I think that's the biggest challenge. I think people really dominate a market, and there's a lot of companies that dominate one specific market, but when they try to get outside that market and expand, I think that's the real test. And so growing our footprint is definitely also really important for us. And then also just improving our product. I think we're always listening to our agents, hearing what they have to say, making adjustments based on the feedback that they give us, and really creating like a great product and a work environment for the people that work for us. So those are the most important things for us, and hopefully we'll really be able to achieve that in the next 5 years.
Gotcha. Well, congrats on what you've achieved so far. It's certainly impressive in general, and especially being able to execute it during a worldwide pandemic. So
No problem. Yeah, thank you guys.
congrats. Thanks a lot for joining us, Joe. Thanks for hosting with me, and look forward to having you back sometime soon and hearing about how much the firm's grown.
Appreciate it. Yeah, nice chatting.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Adam.